Well, a growing number of apartment buildings are now banning e-bikes on their properties.
One of New York's largest co-ops is considering banning e-bikes inside its building.
Residents would not be allowed to store e-bikes or charge their batteries inside their NYCHA apartments or in the common areas of a NYCHA building.
So I'm back in New York, and some of you might have heard the different stories covering the buildings banning e-bikes in residential and office buildings, and it's becoming quite common. But I have an idea on how to stop the bans altogether.
So I was just looking at our channel, and over the past 5 years that we've been producing videos, there's about 500 videos that we've published so far. And there's a lot of videos that we haven't published. This is one of those videos which I've really been struggling with whether or not I should publish it. So I want to give additional context into that thought process before we get into the actual video. As an early trailblazer in electric bikes, it's natural that I'm going to hit some kind of bumps along the road. And I've kind of been hoping that we're starting to move out of the weeds around that, but doesn't totally feel that way. Several years ago, I made a video about one of these bigger challenges I overcame, getting fines from the city for selling electric bikes and really just trying to help the city to wake up to the fact that electric bikes should be legal. Now we're facing new challenges with electric bikes being banned in many apartment buildings, and I made this video about a lawsuit that could really change that. But I wanted this video to be more than just about this lawsuit. I wanted to provide some additional context as to resources that we could potentially consider to address some of these concerns. Several of these solutions are being activated throughout the city, and I really want to encourage the growth of these sort of solutions. One of them is secure bike parking. There's a company called Uni that is really probably one of the more well-known providers in this space and continuing to deploy their secure bike parking solutions. But there's opportunities for us to accelerate this at an even more rapid rate by reusing a lot of the different resources that we have, everything from parking garages to empty storefronts or whatever the case may be. Many cities throughout the world have activated these types of solutions, and I think that as a leading city, we should be doing the same thing. But that's not the only way. Another factor is battery charging. So there's several companies, including Pop Wheels and Swabi, offering secure bike charging infrastructure out on the street or even potentially inside of buildings. And I think we can continue to introduce these type of solutions to make it easier for individuals to charge their batteries safer. The other piece I'll mention more in this video, but it's really about using safe and tested batteries. If you use safe and tested batteries and charge them as they're designed, you're not going to have problems. I can't guarantee that nobody will ever have a problem, but you really reduce the risk to such a small amount that it becomes a practical non-issue. The unfortunate reality is there's still a lot of product out there that doesn't meet these requirements, that hasn't been tested, that is really poor quality. People have tampered with it. And so I don't want to minimize that, but we'll get into the video. Last thing I want to say before we get into the video is that I am sensitive to the issue that people have died or got seriously injured as a result of poor quality batteries. This is something I'm a strong advocate for addressing in any way that we can. But I also really strongly believe in this solution and the potential for it to change and improve our cities in a dramatic way and potentially save and improve many people's lives.
To start out, I wanted to cover a little bit about why this is happening. It's happening more so in New York than in other places, and partly it has to do with the quality of electric bikes that are on the streets and really the way that people live in New York. It's a city and highly populated, and a lot of people live in apartment buildings. So e-bike fires could be an issue in other places, but if it's impacting just somebody's garage or different things like that, this is not something you're going to see that issue arise there. But in a place like New York, where people are living together and what your neighbor does can impact you, kind of have to think a little bit differently about this. One thing I just want to make clear, it is possible to make a safe e-bike battery. We've been selling them in my e-bike shop Propel for years, really before it was required of us. We always took what I like to think of as the high road and really focused on selling bikes that we knew were tested to the appropriate safety standard. Unfortunately, they're not always the cheapest, so a lot of folks choose to cut corners here, and there's a lot of product out there that doesn't really meet any safety standard, and there's not really so much safety concerned in the manufacturing these products. So it's a big issue, and I'd say that That's probably more so the majority than actually the minority of products. So that's a little bit of an issue. How do you address that? So the way that New York City addressed this is in 2022, they introduced a new fire code which requires a specific testing standard for batteries. It's called UL 2271 for the battery specifically, or 2849 for the e-bike overall. This is a independent testing standard. There's different organizations that can test batteries or e-bikes to this standard, but the standard is managed by what's called Underwriters Laboratories. And this is kind of widely recognized in the US as one of the main standard bodies that exists here. The feeling is if something is tested to this standard, just as many other products are, that it's considered to be safe. But unfortunately, the way that these bans work, it's not to say we're not allowing products that don't meet this safety standard. It's rather, we're not allowing any of these products. I get it. It seems complicated. Maybe it's challenging. How do you enforce it? How do you manage it? I think we have to recognize that this is a very viable transportation solution. It's something that a lot of folks depend on, and it really makes sense. So the idea that we're limiting access to that because somebody doesn't want to do a little bit more work is a little frustrating to me, and something I'd like to address. I really don't want to see us lose this before it really has an opportunity to get started. And some folks might say, well, just lock them up outside. And if you know anything about New York, you know that bike theft is a really big issue. And then even still, like, how do you charge it? There's no charging infrastructure. Now, certainly I want to solve these issues, and I think that we should solve these issues as a community, as a city. But in the meanwhile, the most viable option is for people to utilize their apartments. And the city, in a lot of ways, wants to encourage that. Historically, they have encouraged that. They've actually created laws to require this. There's laws that state that any new building that's built is required to have bike parking. There's also laws that state that it's illegal to prevent somebody from bringing their bicycle inside their apartment. And that's kind of where my idea comes from. So, okay, well, if it's illegal to prevent somebody from bringing a bicycle inside of a building, whether it's residential or commercial, there's two separate laws for each of those. And really it was primarily designed because there was a lot of building owners that would say, well, you can't bring your bike in an elevator. So they created a law that says that you can bring your bike in an elevator. If a freight elevator is available, you can use that. If a freight elevator is not available, then the building needs to give you access to a passenger elevator. But now we're talking about bicycles. But are electric bikes bicycles? Some would say so. Actually, the federal law defines electric bikes as bicycle. That law was created in 2002, and it was really designed in a lot of ways to define what electric bikes are and what they aren't. So most electric bikes that are sold on the market in the US are actually considered bicycles in the eyes of the federal government. So the way that they define them is if it's under 750 watts, the power of the motor, and it will only go up to 20 miles an hour unassisted, as in with a throttle. Now, pedal assist does, quite frankly, fall in a little bit of a weird area there, but we'll talk about that another time. But nonetheless, most products that are sold on the market do meet this definition. Electric bikes on the federal level are defined as bicycles, and there is a fire code to address the concerns around what electric bikes are safe and unsafe. One could argue, and I really hope to argue through some level of counsel, that you can't ban an electric bike, which is considered to be a bicycle in the eyes of the federal government in New York City, from bringing it inside of a building. Now, it's one thing if you said, okay, well, what about the fire code? Well, from my side, if it doesn't meet the fire code, as in it's not tested to the UL standard, then yeah, I think it's logical that you could ban it. But if it is tested and it meets the fire code and it's considered a bicycle, as in electric bicycle that meets certain standards, I would think, I mean, what do you guys think? Am I crazy here? I mean, I did actually talk to a lawyer on this topic. He fortunately kind of agrees with me. I mean, it's really up to the court to decide, but that's kind of how you have to do things sometimes. I mean, I'd love for a city council member just to take this up and create a bill, but for right now, I'm deciding to go a little bit of a different way. For my side, I want to create a legal precedent in New York City to say that it is illegal to ban electric bikes that meet the federal definition of a bicycle, and meet the fire code requirements. And in order to do this, basically from my side, you have to create a lawsuit. Now, I don't live in New York City right now, so I'm not considered to be aggrieved. I can't just come up with the lawsuit if I'm not actually impacted. What I want to do is find a volunteer. Maybe one of you watching have been impacted by this. Has your building said no e-bikes allowed? And do you have an e-bike that meets these safety standards? If that is the case, I'd like to talk to you and find a volunteer that'd be willing to go to court, likely would be required to go to court. There'd be no legal fees. I'd find a way to take care of that. And basically, we just present this case to the court. I do want to be sensitive to the fact that many people have gotten injured. Some actually even died as a result of unsafe batteries or people tinkering with batteries and things like that. This is a serious issue, but there's also a safe way to handle this. Separating that out is a little bit challenging and it is nuanced, but we're on a path to do that. We have this new fire code. We have a new regulation on the sale of e-bikes. You're only allowed to sell e-bikes into New York City that meet this requirement. Clearly, there's something here around this UL requirement. Many would feel that building owners, they don't really need to follow any of this stuff. They're a private business and they could kind of conduct themselves how they want to. But if this law states otherwise, if the interpretation of the law states otherwise, maybe that's not totally the case. And as far as I know, none of these fires that have happened are as a result of a battery that was tested to the standard. You got to understand, like this testing standard, it's pretty intense. I mean, you got to drop it from things, put holes through it, do all sorts of things that might be extraordinary circumstances, but the battery should still not propagate into a fire as a result. So it does address pretty much all of the concerns around batteries being hazardous. There's nothing that's going to prevent a fire altogether, but it limits it enough that it's a reasonable risk. And although some people might feel otherwise, if you use the same logic that building owners are using, you should say like, well, we should ban toasters and ovens and everything else. And, you know, I don't know, we're all going to be on a raw vegan diet or something like that. I don't know.
Wait, hold on a second. I just want to interrupt this video for a second just to put a bit of an update here. What's really ironic is that on a federal level, there's been legislation introduced specifically to ban non-tested batteries from entering the US. It's a really big issue because although New York City has their own rules, the federal level doesn't. So there's still untested, unsafe batteries being imported at pretty large numbers on a regular basis. So Ted Cruz is actually blocking this bill in the Senate, even though it already passed in Congress, because he is presenting this logic that if we do ban unsafe e-bike batteries, it could set a precedent for CPSC to ban gas stoves as a result. I don't really know what to do here, but ultimately I know that we need to make improvements here. We need to have more control over the products that are out on our streets. One would expect that. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I get it. I get folks don't want to have too much regulation, but I think we should think about this. So Ted or Ted's friends, if you're watching, please talk to the guy and maybe we could do something about this.
Again, I don't want to be insensitive to the real concerns here, but I do think that there's a smarter way of addressing it, and happy to talk to folks about it. I don't want to make building owners out to be the bad guys. I get where they're coming from. It's a challenging situation. It's really their duty to protect the residents of their buildings. But I do feel like there's a way that we can allow e-bikes and still be smart and safe about it. Try to make some accommodations here, because what I see is this trend where it's becoming just this knee-jerk reaction where buildings just say, nope, not allowed. And the way it works in New York is actually there's a lot of buildings that might be owned by a small number of entities. So if that one entity decides that's the case, it might impact tens or potentially 100 buildings all at one time. And that's pretty serious. And as I mentioned, I've been speaking with the lawyer. His name is Daniel Flansing, and he has a company called New York Bike Lawyers, very well recognized in the kind of bike community in New York. Now, he's primarily focused on representing folks that might have gotten like hit by a car or something like that. He kind of agrees with my logic. I think we got to go down that path of research and really pushing on it a little bit more, but this is where I want to start. I want to start with this conversation. Maybe it'll help raise awareness. We can make changes like this. I actually have experience making changes like this. Now, some of you might recall I made a video a couple years ago about the time I got a $25,000 fine from the city. Now, they gave me a fine for selling unregistered motorized scooters. Now, although the city saw these products as unregistered motorized scooters, technically the law does not define them as such. What they were is pedal assist electric bicycles. And a motorized scooter requires a product to be operated without human assistance. So another one of these things, I mean, it's just the way the law is defined, and you're gonna kind of have to like figure out how to navigate that. What's the intent? There's a lot of details. Sometimes that's just how you have to do it. You have to figure it out and challenge just what is presented to you. Don't always just accept everything as fact and just, roll over, as they say. Basically, I got a fine from the city. That time I called the mayor's office and somehow got it taken care of. Watch the video if you want to learn more about that. But they ended up coming back about a year later and gave me a fine for $7,000. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna go to court for this. I'm not gonna just call the mayor's office again. I'm gonna go to court. And I went to court and we proved that pedal assist bikes were not illegal under the law. And technically the way it works is if something is not illegal, it's considered to be legal. And basically what we did was set a legal precedent. So if somebody was to come to me again with the same sort of thing and say, listen, here, I went to court already on this. If I went in front of a judge again, they got to look at that. And so that's the idea. To create one case, a simple case, just get the details, present it to a judge and see what they feel. My inclination is that they'll agree with my logic here, but maybe I could be wrong, sure. But from there, we can help to publicize this. We can get more information out there. Maybe we'll create a new law. But if nothing else, people have some option if they wanted to go to court for their own, residents, they're having issues or whatever, they have something to refer to. So take that first step. That's what I want to do. I don't know if it's been done before. I don't believe it has been. I'm hoping that somebody be willing to volunteer to potentially go to court, and we'll see what happens. So that's the idea. We'll put a link below where you can just fill out a form, contact us, and let us know what you think. Give us some thoughts on the comments. Again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is just an idea. We do and plan to hire a lawyer, as I mentioned. If you are a lawyer, if you know something about this, love to hear your thoughts. Give us some comments below. And if you're a legislator or somebody that actually has some power, if the mayor's listening here, let's do something about this. Clearly the DOT wants this. I mean, they have this bikes in buildings program. They're really encouraging building owners to allow bikes in there, and that's where they created these laws. They see this as a viable form of transportation, which is continuing to grow, and they want to support it. So let's extend that. Let's think about this. Let's make smart, informed decisions, not just knee-jerk reactions.
I'm also thinking about making a guide specifically for landlords to give landlords the tools that they can use to help them understand ways to address this issue, but not limit their tenants' abilities to enjoy these mobility devices. So if you have some ideas about that video, leave them in the comments. I'll try to take that into consideration as I develop that piece, and really tell me that you'll use it and tell me if you have your own experience there.
Hope this all makes sense. I'll keep you guys posted on how things progress here, and hopefully this works. So let us know what you think, and see you soon. All right, take care.